Hey, thanks so much for making the time to take the time and tune in and to be a part of Jay Fuller Interviews. You can certainly subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jay Fuller Interviews. Join the Facebook group, Jay Fuller Interviews. And of course, we're on Facebook and Twitter as well at Jay Fuller Interviews. Joining us again is Jeff Pearlman. Jeff, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Jeff. Good to be here.
Hey, so I just want to bring up something we just talked about off air. With so many sports going on now, for your job, is it enjoyable for you to watch sports as entertainment, or do you kind of avoid it unless you're assigned to that as a task?
When I was covering sports regularly, like when I was at Sports Illustrated, I was watching everything, especially baseball because I was a baseball writer. Since I left the daily or the regular weekly grind of it all, I don't watch that much. I hate to admit it. I don't watch that much. I'll pay attention. Let me rephrase. The pandemic has really, it doesn't feel that real to me. I don't know why. It just doesn't. I've never really, watching baseball without people in the stands doesn't do it for me. Hockey barely exists to me when it's not a pandemic. Football, my son used to be into it. He's not that into it anymore, so I don't watch that much of it. And the NBA, I love the NBA. It's of all the sports, it's the one I've watched the most, but I don't know. I don't like sitting in front of my TV. Like, I don't enjoy watching things that much. I don't know. I love live. I love going to games. I don't enjoy TV sports that much.
So is that the same before the pandemic, or is that something new because of what we're experiencing now?
It's more, the pandemic has definitely impacted it because the seasons don't feel that. I'm not saying this is fair, but they don't feel that real to me.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that's fair. They are real. They just don't feel it to me. But I have found as a parent, I don't like making excuses to be away from my kids by sitting in front of a TV for a bunch of hours. Like for me personally, if my kids are really into watching with me, then I'd be watching. That'd be great. But they're not. And I'm not going to take Sunday and be like, you guys, you go off. I'm going to be watching the Jets game. It just hasn't, as a parent, I haven't been a great sports fan.
Hey, share a little bit about your kids going back to school. Here in Vermont, my daughter, she's a junior in high school. She's actually only going 1 day a week in person right now. They hope to go to 2 days at the end of the month. What are your kids experiencing?
So I have a high school freshman and a high school senior, and it's all at home right now. They haven't gone back yet at all in person. They're planning, the numbers here in Orange County in California have gone down a good amount, and they're planning on a part-time return in mid-October. I feel bad. My kids are handling it very well. My son just has the most ridiculous amount of homework I've ever seen. Like he finishes, then he's doing homework sometimes till 9 o'clock at night. And I feel like teachers are just trying, I don't blame anyone. They're just trying to figure it out. It's a lot. Sure. And, but I feel bad for him. He's always, right now he's literally downstairs. It's 8 o'clock at night here doing homework. So wow. It's a lot. Yeah.
Hey, so with all the forest fires, wildfires taking place, are you guys safe? Are you guys being affected by the air pollution?
We're safe. We're not that close to it, but it's interesting because every day, my daughter has actually gotten really, we call her the meteorologist, and she's gotten very into giving us the air cleanliness rating every day.
Yeah.
And around here, my wife has asthma, so she does not go out, barely. The car has ash on it. Like you walk out and you see little flecks of ash on the car, which is weird. It looks like dandruff basically on a car. The main problem is it's like you're stuck at home already because of the pandemic. At least you live in California, you can go into your backyard, you can take walks, the palm trees, it's great. Yeah. And you can't even do that right now. Not really. So it's definitely frustrating.
So Jeff, you're a great follow on Twitter. Well, whether you agree with you or not, I just love following you.
Thanks.
This is definitely a crazy time. COVID-19, an election with some leadership that is not providing much leadership, certainly at times, with the forest fires, with sports on, but definitely being different. What advice are you telling your children, and are you experiencing during this time without being disappointed, discouraged, or depressed?
It's hard. I mean, one thing, my daughter, she was heavy into TikTok. It's age appropriate. She's a senior in high school, a lot of TikTok. And she was reading a lot of politics, and you could see it was kind of beating on her. And we sort of instructed her to tone that down. It's a lot. Like I remember being a kid and I knew what was going on. Like I knew whatever, Michael Dukakis was running for president and he's running against Bush and he's a Democrat and he's a Republican, but it wasn't like this.
Yeah.
It wasn't like where it's because of social media, it's in your face all the time. And it just seems like it's a lot for kids to deal with. Like it's hard enough being a kid without the daily barrage of news and information and hatred. And so the thing I've tried to do with her and we've tried to do with her is just minimize it a little bit. But it's hard because she's a high school senior, we're not on top of her all the time. The way we were when she's grow how you're supposed to grow, and she has to make her own decisions. And I know she's burdened by this all, and it's just hard for her. It's a tough time to be a parent. It's a really tough time to be a parent. It's hard. It's counterintuitive. We're always saying to our kids, less screen time. Like that's the thing. Less screen time, less screen time, less screen time. Well, now the only access my son has to his friends is by playing video games online with them. That's the only access he has to his friends. So I actually encourage screen time now because I want him to have at least some semblance of a social life. So it's really weird.
And then I bring this up carefully and hopefully respectfully as well, because pets are so important. They're just part of the family, and you guys lost your dog. It kind of seems like, just one more thing, the straw that broke the camel's back. Can you just share about losing a pet, and did it affect you more than you thought it would?
Yeah, it was probably the hardest thing. So she died. Her name was Norma. She was a little cockapoo. I'm a stay-at-home writer, so Norma's there everywhere, and you turn around and there's Norma. You walk downstairs, there's Norma, and there's Norma, there's Norma. She's always there. Norma, you want a carrot? Hey, Norma, you want a strawberry? Oh, okay. Like she was just there all the time. And it's like any pet, she was loyal and she was devoted and she was all full of love. And to have her not there, I mean, it's been 3 months and it does get easier. It definitely gets easier. But when that happened, I felt like someone just truly took a scissors to my body and was like cutting out my heart without Novocaine. I mean, it was so painful. I don't think I've ever felt, I've lived a charmed life because I don't think I've ever felt that pain before to that degree. I just love that dog so much. Yeah. And I'm grateful for her and I'm glad we had her, but it's the worst.
Jeff Pearlman makes some time, staying up late, joining us. I know for myself, starting this YouTube channel, a podcast, it kind of allowed me during this pandemic to have conversations with people to process what we're all experiencing. For you, the two Writers Slinging Yang podcast, first of all, what makes a good guest on your podcast?
I mean, it's just another journalist. So I like journalists who are storytellers. Most journalists are. So, good writers who are storytellers and have unique outputs. And I would say one thing, it's supposed to be a conversation. Like it's really supposed to be a conversation. It's two writers talking. So, and every now and then I have had guests who just go on and on and on and on. And I'm like, no, it's not what I'm looking for really here. But I love writing. So anyone who writes, I just love hearing their stories and the process and all that stuff.
So is a podcast easier than writing, or explain how it's different but fulfilling for you as well?
Oh my God, it's so much easier. I mean, it's so funny. My daughter's doing her college essays and she was literally right here behind me about 20 minutes ago. And I was telling her how writing never gets easier. And she was like, wow, that's depressing because it's hard. And I was like, it's always hard. It never gets easier. It does not. I don't know if people think it gets easier. If you have a certain level of things you've done, it doesn't get easier. Podcast is easy. It's just talking for an hour. It's a pain to produce a little bit, but the writing never. I mean, I'm 48 years old. I've written 9 books. I've written a gazillion words. It never comes easy. It's still like drawing blood. It's hard.
Jeff, when did you first realize that you had author after your name?
You mean when did I first know?
Yeah, like when you realize, like, wow, I'm actually an author. I'm not just writing, but this is a vocation. This is something real.
I mean, probably when I signed my first book deal. It was probably 2003 when I signed it. So I was 31, and it was a book, The Bad Guys Won, about the '86 Mets. You have it up there on the screen, and it's almost like, I'm not saying it's to this degree, but I remember like when my daughter was born and she was my first child. And you have this moment, you probably do too, where you're like, oh my God, I'm a parent. Like I'm actually a parent. Like, you know what I mean? Or like when you get married, you're like, oh my God, I'm actually married. Or I'm a college graduate. Oh my God, I am actually a college graduate. Like little things. I have my driver's license. I think getting that book deal, when you're like, whoa, I actually have a book deal. Like I was reading, I grew up going to the library and searching for all these books. And now I am. And then when the book arrives, even now, 9 in, it's still the biggest thrill for me is when the book actually arrives. That's a huge thing for me.
Hey, so here's a picture of you with the Magic Johnson statue. Did you grow up a Lakers fan?
No, I grew up in New York, in a small town called Mahopac, New York, and I grew up a New Jersey Nets fan. So far from being a Laker fan, I was a fan of one of the worst franchises in the NBA, the Nets.
And so you've written now 2 books about the Lakers. Can you just share about what drew you in? Last time you were on, you graciously shared about kind of behind the scenes. It needed to have a good story, a story that had a following. And was that just because the Lakers, like the Cowboys, they have a large following? Is that what drew you? Or was there a specific story about the Lakers that you wanted to tell?
It's interesting. This just popped in my head while you're asking that question. I think what it is, it's not really about the franchise, because I wasn't a Cowboy fan. I was a Jet fan. I wasn't a Laker fan. I was a Nets fan. It's almost like it's about the characters. So it's about, and the largeness of the characters. And you look at the Showtime Lakers and the largeness of the characters, Magic, Kareem, Riley, those are huge characters with all these interesting satellite characters, Byron Scott and James Worthy and Kurt Rambis all surround. And you look at this team now, same thing. Shaq, huge. Kobe, huge. Phil Jackson, huge. And then you have surrounding them Rick Fox and Robert Horry and Mark Madsen and weird, and Dale Harris and all the Nick Van Exel. So I think for both of them, it definitely helps that it's a marquee franchise as far as marketing the book. There's no question about it. But I think the main thing I look for are really intriguing characters who are big enough that readers would be interested.
So I just ordered your book actually a couple weeks ago from Audible. I just really enjoyed the audio versions. What is that process when another author said that he wanted the audio book out, but his publisher, they didn't think it was worthwhile to do? What was that conversation like for you? Did you really have to push, hey, we need an audiobook to go with this? Or is that something they told you would happen as well?
No, this is actually, so I've never done my own audio, which annoys me, right? That's the one thing. I've never actually read it. I just want it for the experience, and I've never done it. And that irks me. And what I'll tell you, my last book about the USFL, the audio was awful. It was so bad. The guy butchered names left and right and right and left. And listening to it, it crushed me. Like listening to it, I was actually embarrassed. I put it in because I thought it'd be cool. Here's your book, and it's on audio. That's so cool. Yeah. And it was on CDs. They sent me the CDs, and I have an old 2010 car, so I'm putting in the CDs. And the guy would say, the Lakers won the Generals beat the Stars 12-9. And I was like, wait. And like, there was a quarterback, Bobby Hebert. And he'd be like, and the quarterback, Bobby Herbert. And I was like, wait, wow. What? Yeah. And it's like your book. So for this one, I think I begged them to get someone who's done sports books before. But it was, to be honest, people say it's extra money. Like it's not included in your print deal. You get extra money for the digital. So someone comes to you and says, we want to pay you X amount of money. You're pretty much like, okay, that's not good. I'll take it,
Hey, so you told me before that you did not choose the name Three Ring Circus. What name did you want to go with, or did you have a name picked out?
I don't think I had a name. I was struggling for a name. And I just put on Twitter one day, I was like, oh, if you give me a good title for this book, I think I said, I'll put you in the acknowledgments, which I did. And a bunch of names came in, and one guy said Three Ring Circus. And I was like, that's the title of this book. I know that's the title of this book. Told my wife was like, but I didn't care. I was like, I knew it was a good title. And so there it is. There it sits.
So releasing this book during the pandemic has, difficulty all its own. And then I also imagine the passing of Kobe Bryant also adds maybe intrigue, but also is difficult as well. What are your thoughts, specifically releasing a book during COVID-19?
Those two things you mentioned both are terrible. Releasing a book during a pandemic. The thing, I just had a friend of mine named Jonathan Eig wrote a great book about Muhammad Ali, and he's a good friend of mine. And we were talking about this just today, literally. It's like you spend 2-3 years working on a book, and you bust your butt on it. Like you just work hard, and it's your life. And the thing about a book coming out is it's almost like you get to be you're not really a celebrity, but you basically have 2 weeks in the sun where you're going this TV station and that studio and this guy wants to talk to you and maybe you do this show and that show. It's fun. It's just really fun. Or they're going to send a car for you and they want to get you there. Great. The whole thing is awesome. We want to send you to this bookstore and you're going to do, your hometown bookstore and you're going to do an event. It's really great. Like, it's great. It's a great 2 weeks. It's a magical 2 weeks or 3 weeks, however long it lasts. It doesn't exist with COVID. You still do the different shows. I'm doing this show. It's great to talk to you. It's great to talk to people, but it's not the same as going in somewhere or being driven. It's just cool. It's like a cool experience. So, I mean, of the COVID sad stories, sob stories, mine ranks 10 millionth on the list. It's not real, but it's not. It's a little bit of a bummer. It's like practicing for your bar mitzvah. In fact, one of my cousins just had his bar mitzvah and it was on Zoom and his family was there, but everyone else watched on Zoom. It's like you worked 2 years to study for this thing and it's on Zoom. That sucks. It's a bummer.
Yeah. Hey, where were you when you found out Kobe had died?
So I was sitting in the corner bakery in Irvine, California, eating oatmeal. And a friend of mine named Amy Bass, who's also she's a very good author, sent me a text and it was like, Kobe, rumors are Kobe's dead. I think it was something like that. And I was like, that doesn't mean that. What does that even mean? Like Kobe Bryant. And then I'm sitting there and I'm Googling, refresh Twitter, and you start seeing it. Rumors, Kobe Bryant, helicopter crash, Kobe, helicopter crash. And then you're just like, you're not a guy who has a book coming out. You're just a guy who lives in Southern California and realizes how beloved he is and how much of a figure he is. And it's just really sad. It's not about your book. It's just really sad.
In the process of writing this book, and then with Showtime as well, the definitely connections that Kobe had to the Lakers, did you feel like you were closer to him because you had worked on this project, or could you just distinguish between him, the celebrity, and you, the author?
Well, it's a weird feeling. On the one hand, he didn't talk. Like Shaq talked, Phil talked. Of the big three, he did not talk. And that's okay. I mean, that happens. On the other hand, I spent 2 years kind of researching this guy and getting to know this guy and talking to people about this guy and really getting a feel for him. So I do think it affected me more than if it were some athlete who I wasn't really familiar with or didn't have that much of a knowing of his life. So definitely, yeah. I mean, like I think that day someone said to me, "So this is good for your book, right?" And I was horrified, right? And I wasn't horrified over anything with the book. I was horrified that someone would even think of a book when someone's dying. It's just it's just not right. And the person misspoke. It wasn't like it's a nice person, just a bad moment. But yeah, it sucks. If you could tell me right now, and I really mean this, you could say this book just vanishes, nobody buys it, blah, blah, blah. But Kobe Bryant's still alive. Obviously, it's just a book.
Yeah.
This guy's would die with his daughter. It's unspeakable.
Yeah, tragic. Hey, so I just want to back up a little bit regarding this book specifically, or being an author. Did somebody assign you the subject line and said, go research this book? Or was this something, how did you come across doing this book?
I pitched it. I wrote a proposal. I talked to my agent. I said, I think I want to make this my next book. And this is the first book actually where it was my shortest proposal. Like, it's one thing. I feel like I've written 8 books. I've had a pretty good run. I'm not Michael Lewis or Stephen King, but I've had a good run of sales and success with books. I wrote a very short proposal, explained why this would be a good book. Houghton Mifflin, who had published my previous few books, sent it to them first. They really liked the idea. It was pretty easy. And it was really just me thinking it was a good book idea and then going forward with it. It was definitely, no one brought it to me. I just thought it was a good idea.
So I liked on Facebook how you posted some of your favorite interviews or people that you had talked to, and you got to talk to Coach Del Harris, and how Kobe Bryant did not invite him. Why do you think that was to Kobe's last game?
All right, so I don't think Kobe Bryant was being a jerk with that. I just don't think he thought of it. I think that's important. I wish I even made that more clear. It wasn't Kobe Bryant directly trying to snub him. it was Kobe Bryant, probably had 8,000 people on the list, and Dale Harris wasn't one of them. It wasn't meant to be mean at all. 0% mean, definitely not. But Dale Harris is kind of a sensitive guy. He had a really good coaching career, but doesn't get very much credit. He coached Shaq and Kobe for several years in LA. Nobody really remembers that. All they do is talk about Phil Jackson. I think he's very sensitive. So he definitely was bothered by it, that all these people were invited. And you see on TV, everybody hugging Kobe from his career, and Dale Harris is at his home in Texas. I get it, actually. I can understand that.
So when you interviewed Dale, just talk about, again, the behind the scenes. You set up the meeting to go sit with him, I think at a country club you mentioned, 6 hours. Did you dread that 6 hours, or was that kind of like, oh, this is going to be so much fun? Did you try to cut the conversation short, or was that just something you got caught up in it that you just enjoyed it more than you thought?
No, it was great. I was told he's a long talker, but generally that's a good thing. You'd rather have a long talker than a non-talker. And it wasn't like I scheduled it for 6 hours. I was like, can I come down to Dallas and meet you? And he said, well, why don't you meet at my country club? And I said, that would be great. And he was generous beyond generous with his time. And it was a beautiful day in Dallas, and we sat and had soda, and I guess we ate. Maybe we ate. I don't even remember. But yeah, there were moments when you're a journalist and your job is to push people back. So they're talking and they start going on this tangent, and you just need to go, no, we're over here. He definitely has that a little bit, but he's such a nice and decent guy and a basketball genius. So for me overall, let me say, like, you're going to pay me money to write a book, and I get to fly to Dallas and sit there with Dale Harris and talk basketball. That's my job.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
Yeah, I take that. Hey, so why do you think things worked with Phil Jackson and not Dale Harris? Was that because Kobe matured, or in your opinion, what do you think things worked out with that three-ring circus and not with Dale?
I think a big thing was that Phil arrived with 6 recent championship rings on his finger, and he was known as a guy who coached Michael Jordan successfully. I just think he came in with a reputation, and he also was really good about like Shaq really did not like playing for Kurt Rambis, who was a coach between Dale Harris and Phil, because he thought he was just always coddling Kobe, babying Kobe. And Phil Jackson came in, and number one, he saw Kobe for who he was. He understood who Kobe was. And number two, he wasn't a micromanager. He really wasn't. He just let him be. And he was okay with some butting of heads between athletes. Like, it wasn't that bad. People have asked me, so Phil Jackson, what did he do? And I was like, a lot of what he did is nothing. Like, a lot of what he did is the genius of nothing, of letting it be organic and letting it work out between two adults. So, he's a very smart basketball coach. The triangle offense for the time, which was really Tech's winner, was great. But he was just a real great manager of people.
So I just finished Jack McCallum's book about the Golden State Warriors, and he talks a lot about Jerry West. Can you just talk about Jerry West in this relationship for that three-ring circus book that you have coming out?
I love Jerry West. He's ridiculous how savvy he is. The best example I can give you, the Lakers, they have the 13th pick in the 96 draft. They were not going to get Kobe Bryant. There's no way they're going to get Kobe Bryant. Not happening. And Kobe came out to work out for the Lakers almost just because. Like, why not? And it's the best workout Jerry West has ever hosted. And Jerry West has hosted a lot of workouts. He's never seen a workout like this. It was Kobe and Dante Jones from Mississippi State, and Kobe just ate him up. And then they did another workout where he worked out with Michael Cooper, who was 40 but still in good shape, and Kobe just ate him up. And Jerry West was like, we need this guy. He started dealing with Arn Tellem, who was Kobe's agent, trying to figure out a way to work this out. And it was just really savvy. Like, he was going to go to the Nets. Kobe was going to be drafted by the Nets. And John Calipari was a coach of the Nets at the time.
Yeah.
And John Nash was a general manager of the Nets at the time. And, how ethical is it? I don't know. But Arn Tellem made it very clear to the Nets that Kobe would not play for them. He's going to, if you draft him, he's going to spend the year in Italy. And Jerry West, it's all part. Jerry West has this deal worked out with Charlotte, where if he gets down to Charlotte had the 13th pick, excuse me.
Sure.
If it gets down to Charlotte at 13, we'll swap Vlade Divac for this Kobe pick. And all these mechanisms that happened, telling the Nets not to draft him, the Charlotte, that's all Jerry West. It was like working behind the scenes. Same with Shaq. Like the genius of signing Shaq was this deal he made with Vancouver, where he got rid of Anthony Peeler and George Lynch just to have more money to pay Shaq. All these little things. West was just masterful, and his ego didn't get in the way. He didn't need the credit. He just really desperately wanted to win. He's the best executive, I think, in basketball history.
So not that you would know, but I'm going to ask, did Charlotte just not want Kobe Bryant, or did they just value Vlade coming over more? They thought that would be long-term success for them.
Yeah, they wanted a center. Vlade was 30. He was still a really good player.
Yeah.
They had their eyes on the center. They thought they were ready to compete. So not the best deal. But they were never interested in Kobe Bryant. There was no chance of them keeping Kobe.
So interesting, because I hear different people, talent evaluators, and I'll look at a player, it's like, oh, that kid's going to be great, and I am a terrible. But Jerry West, somehow, he always picks out the best players. I just think of Eddie Jones, who they seem to be the same body type, Kobe and him. Can you just talk about Kobe's drive? I know you mentioned before that Shaq just wanted to have fun, and Kobe was a little bit more annoying with the fact that he just was so motivated or recluse, however you would put it. But just share, what was it about Kobe that actually worked out? Was it the fact that he was coddled maybe when he was younger, as you mentioned, by Kurt Rambis or others?
I mean, I wouldn't say Shaq didn't work hard. I would just say Kobe worked at an extremely high level. I think Kobe was a really interesting bird, right? Like I always say, I've thought this throughout it. I've had this conversation a million times. If you said to me, you could be Kobe or you could be Shaq, right? Now, Kobe had the better career. There's no doubt Kobe had a better NBA career than Shaq. I'd rather be Shaq. I feel like Shaq enjoyed the ride. He got criticized, in the off seasons. He'd be floating on a raft, eating a cheeseburger, smoking a cigar, and he would get criticized, say, oh, you're not like, to me, that's what you're supposed to do. You're 27 years old, you're uber wealthy, you work hard during the season, that's what you're supposed to do. And I just think like Shaq always got the joke of it all. He always seemed in on the joke. Like we're large men wearing pajamas and getting paid ridiculous money to shoot a ball through a hoop. He got that. And Kobe never did. To Kobe, it was kill or be killed. And the stories in this book of Kobe just like wanting to carve the heart out of opponents, like on the Lakers, is ridiculous. And the way he treated rookies on the Lakers, just as threats, not as teammates, but as threats, not great. So it was almost like the things that drove him. He needed to be angry. He needed to find an enemy in different guys. He needed to take it to you. And, in all his splendor and beauty, I don't know how much joy there was for himself.
I just heard someone say that everybody, in this gentleman's opinion, needs a counselor or needs some sort of therapy just growing up and finding your own identity, not just how you were treated when you were a kid. When you look at professional sports, do you think there should be more of an emphasis on getting that mental awareness as well as mental health training and coaching along the way?
The one area where my brain immediately went to when you were saying that is the adjustment to after your career is over. It's a ridiculous plummet if you think about it.
Yeah.
You're Superman. You're making millions of dollars. You're playing in front of packed arenas, people chanting your name, wearing your shirts. And then one day it's over, it's just over. And you're trying to get a job. You're trying to be relevant. People remember you for something you can no longer do. You'll always be most famous for something you can no longer do. You'll never again have that feeling. No matter what, if you become the best car salesman in America, or you open the best bar in America, or you become a great lawyer, you're never going to have that feeling of scoring a touchdown in front of 70,000 screaming fans. Never. And I just think that sort of transition, I don't think athletes are prepared for at all. And I actually think all teams and all leagues should have counselors specifically for the transition from playing to post-career.
And I was just curious too, with rookies, and it's been said that here in the Northeast, Boston's a hard place to play with the media and all of that. And so with so many distractions in LA, can you just talk about some of those opportunities that Kobe or Shaq were exposed to that maybe Shaq would have been more focused if he was not in LA? I know he put out that rap album and did some other things early on. Do you think that was good for him and good for his basketball career as well?
I think it was great for him. I really do. I think it was great for him. I think he wanted to rap. He rapped. He was actually not bad. I mean, he wasn't great, but he wasn't terrible. He didn't embarrass himself. Shaq was okay. He wanted to be an actor. He was in Blue Chips. That was okay. He was in Steel. That was terrible. He was in Kazam, which is the worst movie of all time. But like, I struggle with people who say like, oh, he should have, like, he had a great time. Right. Like, he had a great time. He was an athlete in LA having so much fun. And I hope everyone has that level of enjoyment. You know, I really do. And then people be like, oh, his career could have been. The guy won 4 NBA championships.
Yeah.
He won 4 NBA championships. He was the best player in basketball for 5 years, the most dominant force in basketball for 5 years, maybe more. What more do people want? He had fun. Yeah. He won. He was a great teammate. He's probably Shaquille O'Neal and Brett Favre are the 2 best teammates I've ever written about, as far as beloved in the clubhouse, giving, embracing. There's just no one better. So I just don't buy this idea that he could have been blank or he should have been blank. Yeah. I say this. We talk about this in my house all the time. There was a long stretch when Muhammad Ali would walk around, and wherever he went, he would make people feel good. You've seen the videos, like Muhammad Ali Muhammad Ali at a barbershop or wherever. And people would do this and he'd do this. When he died, who filled that role, right? We actually talk about this in my house, I swear to God. Right. Snoop Dogg, Dolly Parton, right?
Yeah.
Magic Johnson a little bit, and Shaq. You know, like, those are the people who, like, if you see Shaq, you could be my 78-year-old Jewish mother. You can be a kid in South Central. You can be a kid in, doesn't matter. There's something about Shaq that he's a big hug walking towards you. You know? Yeah. That's a freaking amazing thing. That's an amazing thing.
And I think we need more of that.
Yes.
If we could just look like that. I apologize. There's an echo right there. For you personally, I imagine that you've done well for yourself from your first book until now. And I would say that you want to take full advantage of those opportunities. Not just you. Is that similar to what you're saying about Shaq, that he got to experience the fun of being a kid in LA with lots of money?
I think so. But, you know, it wasn't just LA. Like, his off seasons were mainly spent in Florida, and he'd be in Orlando. He had a mansion in Orlando, and he'd have big parties at his mansion, and he had a huge pool, and he just like, or he would go in LA, he'd be going to premieres, or he went to, but he was, I'm telling you, like, perfect example. Lakers had a guy named Mike Penberthy, who was a reserve guard, Masters College, came out of nowhere. And he told me, like, he said, his first game, he wore a suit he bought, or a jacket he bought at like Banana Republic, you know, off the rack. And Shaq sees him and he's like, yo, you got any suits? And no, he's like, come here tomorrow. And Shaq brings his personal tailor and buys Mike Penberthy's first 6 suits. And Penberthy told me every time they were on the road, Shaq would text him and be like, hey, we're going out here. Hey, we're going out here. And he said he would pay for everything. He'd pay for absolutely everything. He said it was like having the coolest big brother, you know, around. And I mean, that was just him. I'll tell you a story. I was with Shaq. I interviewed Shaq in Atlanta. He may not even remember it now. It was like a year and a half ago. It was like an hour and 20 minutes. It wasn't a big deal to him. I'm sitting with him in the Turner Studios, interviewing him, and his cell phone rings. It's a FaceTime. It's his daughter. And he's like, hey, excuse me one sec. Picks up his phone. I'm sitting right there. And his daughter goes, Daddy, I don't know if you remember, but I think he said my friend's mother died recently. It's really sad. And Shaq goes, listen, I'm paying for the entire funeral. Make sure they don't pay for anything. Okay, love you. Bye. What were you talking about? Like, he wasn't doing that for show.
Sure.
There's just a million stories like that. There was a guard on that team, Joe Crispin, who played for the Lakers. Played out of Penn State. He was the last man. He wasn't a big deal. First NBA game is approaching for Joe Crispin. And Shaq says to him, listen, I want to fly your family here, so they should be here for your first game. Chrisman's like, nah, Shaq, you can't do that. You can't do that. A couple of days pass. Joe, you got to give me your information. He didn't only fly him there. He flew him first class. You know, like Mike Pemberthy told me when his dad died, Shaq asked if he could pay for his funeral. You know, like very few people like that.
Yeah. Hey, so what have you learned and applied from being around players like Shaq or different characters that you have interviewed or written books about?
Whew. I mean, I would say one thing I've learned throughout my career in sports writing is to always go in with an open mind and always go in willing to hear who these people are and hear their stories and hear their concerns and sort of, you know, it could be Shaq, a military kid from, you know, who played at LSU, could be some hurly-burly, you know, offensive lineman from the middle of Nebraska, whatever. Like, you have to be really open-minded and want to listen to people's stories. And it doesn't matter what your politics are, what their politics are, what your religion is, what their religion, like, everyone has a story to tell. You know, everyone has a story to tell, and there are lessons to learn from everyone about their journey. Like this book, it doesn't always lean super friendly to Kobe as far as who he was, right? Okay, so what do I learn from that? I learned, number one, he worked harder than anyone out there. And if you want to emulate one person's work ethic who's ever walked the earth, Kobe Bryant's work ethic is the one to emulate. Number two, I learned that he grew. Like the guy I wrote about in this book was a kid in his 20s. The guy who died was 41 years old. He was a father of four. He was a husband. He was a youth basketball coach. He was an Academy Award winner. Like, you can't look at someone at a certain point in their life and just assume that's who they are through the entirety. You know, it'd be like judging the bully from your high school now sitting here 30 years later and saying he must still be a jerk. You know, people change. I just think journalism allows you to see people and the evolutions of people and to kind of take note of it.
So behind me is a picture of your Twitter feed. Nearly 60,000 followers. You've tweeted over 96,000 times.
That's old. That actually is old. I'm way past that now. Yeah.
That's so when you reach the 1 million mark, 2 million mark, how do you think you have going to have changed or going to have to change so you can keep going and grinding and pursuing with grit these different stories and learning along the way?
Huh. I mean, I hope I don't hit the million mark of tweets. I mean, as soon as I'm done with writing books, I'm done on Twitter. I can tell you that. The toughest thing, I think the toughest thing, so I'm 48 years old. And it's amazing. I was just talking to a colleague of mine the other day. It's amazing how it just goes like that. And you were the young upstart and you blink and you're here, you know, like you're the guy with just got your first book deal. Now you're in 9 books and it's hard, right? And I think the thing that I ponder a lot is this fight to stay relevant. It's hard. It's hard. It's really hard. The fight to stay relevant and for people to still want to read you and still be interested in what you have to say, you know, and not get dismissed as this old guy on social media or this obsolete guy, you know? So it's important to pay attention to what people are doing. It's important to not be dismissive of younger generations and younger people. It's important not to try to imitate younger people because you look like an idiot. You know, if I started dropping the slang of millennials, I'd sound like a moron. But it is important to understand it and try to appreciate it and at least grasp it. So that's what I try to do, you know, and hopefully people keep buying books.
And so how have you found your voice from this first book you did about the Lakers to your book now? Have you changed in tone and tenor? I know as a public speaker, as a pastor, I've changed several times about how I want to communicate. When you put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, have you had to change or have you changed from when you wrote your first book until now?
I think
writing style.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. My first book came out, again, I think it was 2004. And it was about the 86 Mets. And I was looking at it recently because somebody asked me to sign a copy for them. And I was skimming through the book. I didn't really recognize it. Like, I didn't recognize the writing style. Not that I was like, oh, this is terrible, but I didn't recognize it. It was really different. I think I'm definitely a more dogged and thorough reporter now than I was then. I think I interviewed like 160 people for that book, and that felt great. if I wrote that book today, I'd be interviewing 1,000 people, you know, like far more opponents and get more into their childhoods. And maybe it'd be a better book. Maybe it'd be a worse book. I don't know. But I definitely am more dogged, and I always want to know the details if I can find them. I'm very into details. And so I feel like that's probably a change for the better, you know?
So Jeff, as we wrap things up, thanks again for making the time. You mentioned before that you have another book idea. How do you put that on the back burner with trying to sell this book, but also research that next idea at the same time?
It sucks. So I'm working on a book about Bo Jackson, and I was reporting hard. Like I'm deep into it. I'm loving it. It might wind up being my favorite subject, actually. I can't say enough good things about the career and life of Bo Jackson. And then like a couple of days ago, I said to my wife, I was like, I think I need to take 3 weeks and just put that aside and focus on promoting this book. And I hate it. It's like you're riding a bike and you're going on this long downhill, and then you just got to stop. It's not comfortable. It's not fun. I don't really know an alternative though. And it's funny because you promote a book, you do 1 million interviews. It starts to beat on you. After a while, you're like, I'm saying the same thing over and over again. And I'm not there yet at all, but you do get there. And then it's weird because you miss it. Like then you stop. Nobody wants to talk to you about your book anymore. And you watch the Amazon ranking getting worse and worse and worse. And someone will say eventually, I saw your book on a dollar bin and so. And you're like, wait, what? And so it's weird how you're like, I need to get back to Bo Jackson, but I really want to talk about this book. And then toward the end, you're tired of talking about the book, but you're sad no one wants to ask you about it anymore.
Yeah, that's how it happens, I guess. I remember last time we spoke, I kind of said how my mom cried when I went to college, my second semester, my senior year of college. And since that point, we just dropped off my son for his first semester of his freshman year. And it's sad and it's different. When you think back to your parents, how proud are they of you? What would you tell them about what you've learned from when you were a cocky kid to the point you are now?
Well, my parents are great. Joan and Stan Pearlman in Somers, New York. And although now they're Florida residents, but my parents, I probably told you this last time. I mean, when I was a kid in high school, I would sit on their bed and I would read them my articles from the Mahopac High School Chieftain. And they would pretend to listen. Now, maybe they were listening, but I can't imagine they were listening because they were the most boring, god-awful stories ever. But they would sit there and they'd listen. And my parents, I had an internship at the Champaign-Urbana News-Gazette in the middle of Illinois after my sophomore year of college. My parents had 2 cars. They let me take one of them to Champaign-Urbana for the summer. My dad drove out with me. They paid for my apartment for that summer. I think I made $5 an hour. I was 20 years old. They just let me move to the middle of nowhere and live in an apartment. The year after that, I had an internship at the Nashville, Tennessee, and my dad drove down with me to Nashville, let me use the car. He flew back. I mean, they paid for my college education. I don't have any loans. They're I can't say biggest fan sounds corny, but they're just so supportive, and it means so much to me. It means so much to me. Just like, because I used to say to my mom and my parents, this is what I want to do. Like, this was my dream. I'm actually living my career dream. You know, this is exactly what I wanted to do. And the other day, my mom said she didn't know this meant so much to me, but she doesn't love sports at all. But she looked through the book, and she's like, it's just kind of amazing that you put this together. And that actually really got me, you know, like, because you always want your parents' approval, you know, and so they're great. My parents are the best. They could not have been more supportive of me.
I love that story you shared. I think it was on Twitter or someplace where you actually took a video because somebody wanted to make sure it was you that they were talking to. And so you just showed the back of your book. Was that like a humble flex of saying, no, it is me. Check the book cover. This is what I look like.
Well, I didn't know what else to do. It wasn't a humble flex. It was like, I don't really know what to do. The guy's like, there's a lot of scammers. How do I know this is not a scam? So I literally took my camera, opened one of my books, said, hey, this is me, and then showed the picture of me. He's like, all right, I guess it's you. You know, so I wasn't trying to be anything. I just wanted the guy to talk to me. So it worked.
Hey, Jeff, I appreciate you so much, and thanks again for making the time. Three Ring Circus, make sure you go out and buy that book, whether it's on Audible or from Jeff Pearlman's website, jeffpearlman.com. And Jeff, the last question I'll get you out on, that is simply, who do you like to read in your free time, or is it kind of like sports? You don't like to read in your free time?
Oh no, I love reading. I'm more of a places guy. Like I'm really into political. I'm very political, as you know, from social media. I read a lot of the Washington Post, read a lot of the New York Times. I know people are like, the Atlantic. I absorb sort of. I love Gail Collins of the New York Times, is one of my favorite writers and columnists out there. And in sports, give me a book by Howard Bryant or Jonathan Eig or John Wertheim, so many great writers out there. Miran Fader, Bleacher Report. There's just a lot of good writers, so I enjoy.
Hey, Jeff, thanks again for making the time. Go get some rest, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Jeff. You ask great questions. I really enjoy it.
Hey, thanks so much. Again, that's Jeff Pearlman. Make some time. Check him out, jeffpearlman.com, Instagram @Jeff_Pearlman, and again on Twitter. Great follow there, Jeff Pearlman. Is easy enough. Go get that book, Three Ring Circus, and enjoy it, as I can't wait to get it, read it, listen to it, and share it with others. You are listening to my podcast, Jay Fuller Interviews, on YouTube, the Facebook group, Instagram, and Twitter, and it will be in podcast format coming soon. The Backfire podcast on Spotify and all other spots, so you can subscribe there and share with others, as we just share people's stories, because their story will make our story much better. All right, I'm out. You guys have a great night.